Hello, everybody. Is anybody out there? I'm slowly starting our leadership Facebook Live, just getting familiar with this format. Facebook Lives are always a little bit of a trip for me because it's very one-sided. I don't know if anybody's out there. I'm looking in my chat, hoping I can see, but I think everyone's on Facebook and I'm on StreamYard. So anyways, I'll just start. Hopefully there's people out there listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to leadership and what leadership can be and what else is possible. So I'm going to be 100% honest. The thing that really inspired me to start creating more conversation and ultimately a class and a body of work on leadership is because of some of the women that I work with. And over the years, I've watched people sort of step up a lot, but then also struggle in certain areas, and really realizing that a lot of us don't really know what leadership is, or we have a lot of points of view that prevent us from having any real ability to lead ourselves personally, to lead others, to lead our vision, etc. So leadership is this really, I think, a very broad area that can be applied in so many different ways. And the first thing that has to be recognized is that you have to be leading your life, period. So that was sort of like this, okay, let me talk more about leadership and see what I can get to with that, because I've had to recognize that I am a leader, and all of the ways in which I do lead that have worked, and a lot of the ways in which I've led that haven't worked. And then sort of like the second part of this, I was watching this documentary called Plandemic that they created about what's going on with Corona right now. And maybe somebody could put a link in the chat somewhere for it. I actually don't know what the website is for it. I think it's maybe theplandemicmovie.com or something like that. Anyways, it was really interesting watching it because it's full of information. But in fact, in the end of the movie, I was heavy. And I looked at that and I was like, wow, that's so interesting, because most of the stuff that they're talking about in the movie is actually valuable information, but not all of it's true. And so it was just this other case of like, okay, so here's this other bit of information that's, what do I do with this? And I looked at the energy at the end and I went, oh, it's heavy. Okay, so not all of it's true. And it was just that, it was that easy for me to be like, clear again. And that's what leadership is. It's the ability to know what you know when you know it. And I see that willingness to know what you know when you know it is this gravely missing element in people. And part of what I sort of got from watching that Plandemic movie, amongst all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, with all the stuff that is going on in the world right now, is that, like, wouldn't it be so interesting if everyone just knew what they knew? And so it's like, I personally don't watch the news. I don't really, it's not because I don't want to, I just have never been interested. It's not like, so I haven't really started now. But I hear things from other people about how they're like doing these like ticker tapes of like death tolls from the coronavirus in the United States on the television. And I'm just like, wow, like that must be so freaking people out. And I looked at it, it's like, really, we would never have problems personally or globally if people just knew. And I know I'm putting it very simply, and I know that all of life, even leadership, and knowing what you know, can be ease, joy, and glory. And so it's like everywhere that you've been unwilling to lead your own choices based on your knowing, because somebody sometime told you were wrong, or somebody didn't acknowledge your awareness, or you were deliberately invalidated. It's like all of the reasons and justifications and histories and stories that you have and that you tell yourself for that make it difficult for you to know what you know super easy. Will you destroy and create all that? Right, wrong, good, bad, all nine, PUD, PUC, shorts, boys, and beyonds. Woo! That funny thing I just said, will you destroy and uncreate all that? Right, wrong, good, bad, all nine, PUD, PUC, shorts, boys, and beyonds is the Access Consciousness Clearing Statement. If you are new here, if you don't know me, I'm Shannon O'Hara. I didn't even introduce myself, but I'm Shannon. And I'm using the Clearing Statement of Access Consciousness in the chat. Hopefully, can somebody paste a little link to go to theclearingstatement.com so you can get more information about like what that actually is that I'm saying and how it works, because it's sort of like this magic delete button that clears all of the energy that creates the reality that we're experiencing. So if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to keep using it a lot. If you're interested, please go to theclearingstatement.com and find out what it is that I'm saying, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining that now. I'm just going to use the tool. If you were leading, where would you be leading to? So I've often wondered if everybody's a leader or if only certain people should be leaders. Because you know how like when you look at, it's really interesting to look at every dynamic, whether it's just a two people dynamic, whether it's a husband or wife, two friends, when there's two people together, there's that thing of like, that we all know called like the alpha. So there's usually like the alpha in the relationship, or the person who leads, or the person who's the chooser. And then like when you get into a larger group, you also still usually there will always naturally be a leader that emerges, whether that's in any number of people. And obviously the dynamics of leadership change depending on the amount of people involved in the scenario or the situation. And something that my dad's always taught me is that leaders should always be empowering. And if you're not empowering others, you're not actually leading, you're being a dictator. And actually, that's not something he's told me. He told me about the, empower. And I looked around at the world at all of these people that are considered leaders in government or even socially, and people just in the world that are considered leaders. And many of them actually aren't leaders, they're dictators. We can also be dictators in our own relationships by just wanting what we want. It's like a dictator wants what they want, regardless of how it impacts everybody else. And we all know how we can sometimes be that way in our relationships. So we become this dictator rather than the leader that empowers everybody to have greater and to be greater. And so what I would love to see is a world full of people who are willing to be greater and who are greater. And that's really something that I've dedicated a lot of my life to, empowering others and creating energies, content, possibilities, products, everything that I can, including this conversation right now, to empower people to know that they know. Because I know that if you don't know what you know, the world is going to suffer from that. And that's this really dynamic thing to get, is that like your knowing is relevant. It's like, how many of you guys disregard yourselves or judge yourselves, which is like disregarding on steroids. Actually, judging yourself is even stronger than disregarding yourself. It's completely destroying yourself. So it's like, how many of you guys disregard yourselves, judge yourselves, and in so doing, never really contribute what you can to the world. So everywhere that you think it's okay to disregard your gift, will you guys please destroy and then create that? Right and wrong, good and bad, all nine. PUD, PUC, shorts, boys, and beyonds. So something that I know all too well is the sort of how intense it is to start trusting yourself and to really choose to go with what you know rather than the judgments that seem so real and true. It's like, if you guys don't know, many of you on here already probably know this, and some of you guys might not know this. My first business, and the first thing I really struck ground with was something called Talk to the Entities, which I started in my mid-20s, and I'm 40 now, so I've spent a lot of time with it. And it's a spirit awareness, consciousness, cultivation body of work. I've written 2 books, and there's a lot of courses and classes and a whole there's worldwide facilitators for it. So it's gotten big and how does it get any better? And it's all stemming from my ability to talk to the spirit world, see ghosts, hear ghosts, and be aware of entities. And that's a very judgeable offense. Now it's a lot more easy and a lot more popular than it's ever been, but it's not something that you really necessarily want to tell a lot of people about because there tends to be a tremendous amount of judgment about it. So I started from this place of knowing that I was different, and how was I going to deal with what I knew was possible in the face of the whole world that was telling me that I was wrong, you know? And that's what we're up against. It's like, you guys have been basically told that you're wrong, sometimes even by the people who you trust the most, who are sort of like supposed to have your back and support you. It's like, a lot of times we're brainwashed to never trust ourselves. And I'm not trying to blame anybody. I'm trying to emphasize, I'm trying to emphasize that, like, for you to get the reality and the scope of what one is up against when they go to trust themselves. And the cool thing about all that is, like, no matter how much you've been invalidated, no matter how much you've had your knowing made wrong or your awareness, you know, even beaten out of you in some cases, you can never, ever truly stop knowing. And so the choice to know what you know is literally a choice. And that's the leadership that I'd love to see in the world. A place where knowing is encouraged, cultivated, and allowed. And that has to start with you. And it's sort of like, I've seen people sort of also weaponize this, well, I was following my knowing, you know, as a way of invalidating or harming others or making choices that aren't great for all. And so this whole leadership conversation is one that I so desperately, it's like, I've seen so many amazing people who could inspire so many and could create so much greater, but then they let sort of like their own judgments get in the way, or they let their, you know, petty mindedness get in the way. So they like choose to be smaller rather than greater. It's like, don't we have enough petty mindedness in the world? Don't we have enough like people who are willing to choose less and push others down to have the artificial sense that they're greater? It's like, isn't there enough of that in the world? What kind of a world would you like to live in? And so this is where the leadership conversation becomes very relevant. What kind of a world would you like to live in? Are you making the choices that lead to that world? And so what I'm going to be doing is a leadership class. Now, it's so interesting to do this because I am a natural leader. But the thing that makes me, and it's interesting because I've looked at that and I'm like, so what's actually creating that for me personally? I will never stop knowing what I know or choosing what's possible for me because others don't get it, or because somebody tells me that I can't. In fact, if you tell me I can't, I'm going to go for it even harder. So it's been really interesting over the years, especially doing something like Talk to the Entities. because it's so unusual and it's so different and it's such a judgeable offense, I've had to really trust the energy and really trust my awareness and really trust my knowing above and beyond everything that tells me what I'm doing is, wrong, evil, awful. I'm a crazy person, and every time I chose for my knowing rather than for other people's judgments, I got more free. And that's so what I desire for each and every one of you, is to be free. Because I know the freer you are, the freer I'll be. It's like consciousness begets more consciousness. So everywhere that you've given up your knowing for other people's judgments, and even for your own judgment, would you like to destroy and uncreate all that, please? Right and wrong, good and bad, all nine, pod, poc, shorts, boys, and beyonds. And that's like, would you be willing to function for more knowing in your life? One of the great questions and tools my dad gave me that's really helped me stop being crazy through life is when I'm doing stuff, whether it's in relationship, business, when it kind of comes to my family or my body, all areas of life, whenever I'm sort of like, this actually doesn't happen anymore because I completely weeded out the I don't know reality from my world. Every time I would go to I don't know, my dad would say, "What do you know? What do you know?" So what if, you guys, you gave yourself a little challenge? What if you committed to replacing I don't know with the question, what do I know? What do I know? What do I know? What do I know? And when you're willing to have that knowing, ooh, you get great. So if you're interested in getting greater, having more of you, and leadership in general, I started to say something earlier and I went off on a tangent, but what I think is hysterical about this leadership conversation is, number one, leadership is a vital life skill, period. And I think so few people really know what true leadership is. And I think it's hysterical that I'm talking about it because I am such an outlier. I am such a different thing. I don't function in the normal context of reality and society. I am definitely a fringe person. Or not even, I mean, I'm out beyond the fringe. I'm like on a whole other planet. And I know that there's these huge leadership corporate things that they do for corporations, and they teach leadership in business and da. None of which actually has to do with empowering anybody. It's all about how to be right. And that's not leadership. That's disempowering. And it's sort of so there's so many different ways. There's so many different things I have to say about leadership. It's a leader always empowers others to be greater. Okay, so this is how you know if you're being a leader, or if somebody's being a leader, or if they're being a dictator, or if you're being a dictator, or a follower. So there's three options. Actually, I actually believe there's those three options in life. Those are always the dynamics. You're going to have a leader, a dictator, or a follower in any social situation. It's who do you want to be? And not to judge dictator or follower, because I do believe that those have their places, and that if you were an infinite being, you would have every choice available to you. And if we weren't choosing based on judgment, if we were choosing based on willingness to have all possibilities, those would be available too. The definition of consciousness is consciousness includes everything, including dictators and followers, and judges nothing. So leader, follower, dictator. And a true leader will always empower others to be greater. A dictator will always do whatever it takes to get what they want, no matter the consequences to everybody else. And I'll be honest, I've done that in my relationships for sure. Like I've wanted my own personal needs fulfilled at the expense of others. I've totally done that. So it's a place to look at where you've been a dictator, acknowledge it, and be like, is that really the impact I want to have in the world? You know, so that's dictator. The follower can be I think following can actually be two different ways. You can follow as a way of never having to be the chooser in your own life. So there's those followers who just follow because they don't want to have to make a choice themselves. They don't want to have to take responsibility for their lives. They'd rather put that on others. That's not a disposition I particularly understand or can relate to, because I've always wanted to be choosing my life. I don't like waiting for others, nor do I, ever want to make what's possible for me predicated on somebody else's choices. So there's that kind of follower. Those who won't be the source of their own life, make choices, lead their life, claim and own what they know. They want other people to do it for them. There's that follower. And then there's the follower who's the supporter. And this is a very different kind of a follower. This is the follower who adores, who cares, who worships. And this can be misconstrued because we all know the followers of worship, right? Like those who go into like religious zealotry as followers, or they worship their deities, they worship their god, they worship their religion, they worship. We've seen that follower not be a creative generative source, but that follower can also be an incredible contribution, depending on what they're following. And depending on how they're choosing. So the follower can give up their own awareness, and that's when you become like the needy, disempowered follower. But the follower can also totally keep their awareness, totally have themselves, and completely contribute to that which they are following. And so a true leader knows when to lead and when to follow. Because following can also be a creative contribution in the dynamic, depending on the point of view of the follower. And in every single social situation of our life, in every situation that has to do with people, whether it's social, professional, familial, I think that's it. I think those are the only situations we have, social situations we have, social, business, familial. There will always be those three components, dynamics going on amongst people: leader, dictator, follower. And remember, follower gets broken down into two separate areas. Maybe I should start calling them, I should call one a follower and one a worshiper, because the worship is actually the contribution. And so if you're clear on these dynamics, you become more creative. You can be more effective in what you'd like to create and how you'd like to create it. And that's my whole thing here about leadership. It's like, most people aren't really effectively creating their lives, their vision, what they know is possible, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can relate to that, it might be because you're missing some of this information about being a leader versus being a dictator versus being a follower versus the other one, which I haven't quite figured out what to call yet. It's like the other kind of follower, the two followers. So it's pretty exciting. And I love this harmony that's possible in the universe. So if you'd like to learn more about leadership, start actually creating greater, come join me. I'm going to do a class. There'll be, I think someone will put a link to that class. And it starts maybe in like a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like this. Please look at the link. And if you don't come to the class, please. Replace I don't know with what do I know. Okay, I love you guys. I so desire to see all of your magic in all of its forms existing in the universe. Even everything that's like so wrong about you, that's really what's strong about you. It's like, let's get weird, let's get different, let's get free, let's change everything. How does it get better than this? See you guys out in the world. Bye.